Modern heating feels advanced until you uncover Native American methods that worked better for centuries. Why did we abandon these cheap, ingenious techniques? Prepare to question what progress really means for keeping warm and comfortable. Long before anyone thought about cranking up a thermostat, Native Americans had already figured out how to turn freezing winters into something survivable. Their secret weapon? The sweat lodge. These weren't just random huts thrown together. They were engineering marvels disguised as simple dome-shaped structures. Here's how brilliant this actually was. First, they'd build a frame using bent saplings or wooden poles, creating that perfect dome shape that naturally distributes heat evenly. Then came the covering. Thick blankets, animal hides, or whatever they could layer on to trap every bit of precious warmth inside. But the real magic happened with what they called the grandfather stones. These weren't ordinary rocks picked up from anywhere. They had to be specific types that wouldn't crack or explode when heated to extreme temperatures. The stones got fired up in an outdoor pit until they glowed red hot, then carefully carried inside using wooden tools or antlers. Once positioned in the center pit, water poured over them created instant steam that could heat the entire space to sauna-like temperatures. And the weird part is, people used these year-round. Even when blizzards raged outside and temperatures dropped well below zero, families would spend an hour or more inside these heated domes. Their body temperatures would rise just like in modern saunas, creating that deep, penetrating warmth that lasted long after they stepped back into the cold. The whole system required zero external fuel once those stones were heated. No chopping endless amounts of firewood. No maintaining dangerous indoor fires that could burn down your shelter. Just pure, consistent heat that could be regulated by adding or removing stones or controlling the amount of water used for steam. What made this even more ingenious was the social aspect. Entire families could warm up together, sharing body heat while the grandfather stones did their work. But sweat lodges were just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Native Americans had discovered something even more impressive for long-term winter survival, and it involved digging deep into the earth itself. While sweat lodges worked great for temporary heating, some tribes needed something more permanent for those brutal winter months that seemed to drag on forever. Enter the Earth Lodge. Basically, nature's version of a super insulated bunker that could keep you cozy when the world outside wanted to freeze you solid. These weren't your typical above-ground homes. Smart builders dug these massive structures right into hillsides, sometimes going down 3 or 4 feet below ground level. Why go through all that back-breaking digging work? Well, the earth itself becomes your best friend when temperatures drop. Underground stays a steady temperature year-round, which means less work keeping warm. The construction was pure genius. Heavy logs formed the basic frame, but here's where it gets interesting. They packed thick earth and sod all around those walls, creating insulation that would make modern homeowners jealous. We're talking walls that could be 2 feet thick in some places. The roof? More earth and sod, sometimes so thick that grass would actually grow on top during spring. But the real magic happened with the central fire pit. Those earthen walls acted like giant heat batteries, soaking up warmth during the day and slowly releasing it back throughout the night. Some of these earth lodges could maintain temperatures around 50 degrees inside, even when winter was throwing everything it had at the outside world. The weird part is how long this heat would last. Families reported staying warm for days after their fire had gone completely cold. That thick earth didn't just block the wind, it stored thermal energy like nobody's business. Even the entrance was designed smart, often built as a tunnel or covered walkway that prevented cold air from rushing straight into the living space. These weren't small spaces either. Some earth lodges housed entire extended families with separate areas for sleeping, cooking, and storage. Living underground might sound cramped, but when survival depends on staying warm, brilliant engineering beats comfort every time. Of course, not everyone could dig into hillsides, which led some tribes to develop entirely different approaches to beating the cold. Native Americans figured out something that modern architects are just catching on to. Sometimes the best way to stay warm is to go underground. These weren't your typical basement apartments either. We're talking about sophisticated pit dwellings that could keep families cozy when surface temperatures dropped to bone-chilling levels. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Dig down 3 to 6 feet into the earth, and you've already escaped the worst of winter's fury. Earth naturally maintains a more stable temperature than air. usually around 50 degrees, even when it's negative 20 above ground. That's already a 70-degree difference without lighting a single fire. But here's where it gets clever. These weren't just holes in the ground with a roof slapped on top. Tribes in the far north and mountain regions engineered entrance tunnels that acted like thermal airlocks. Cold air would settle in these lower passages, while warm air stayed trapped in the main living space. Basic physics, but incredibly effective. The walls got special treatment too. Bark strips, woven reeds, or thick grass mats lined the earthen sides, creating multiple insulation layers. Some families even packed clay between wooden supports before adding their organic wall coverings. The result? A natural thermos that held heat for hours after the fire died down. Then there's the genius of strategic positioning. Opening placement became an art form, always positioned away from prevailing winds, often facing southeast to catch morning sun while avoiding brutal northern gusts. Some pit houses included small ventilation shafts that could be plugged with bundles of grass during the worst storms. The temperature control was remarkable. Families could maintain comfortable 70-degree living spaces with just occasional small fires, even during extended blizzards. Compare that to heating a modern house during a power outage, and you'll appreciate the engineering involved. These underground homes worked year-round too, cooler in summer, warmer in winter. Perfect climate control without any moving parts or utility bills. But staying underground wasn't the only solution Native Americans developed for harsh weather conditions. While earth lodges worked great for permanent settlements, what happened when tribes needed something more flexible? Enter the brilliant double-walled wigwam. Basically the world's first insulated dome home, and way smarter than it looks. These weren't your typical lean-to shelters. Native builders created dome or cone-shaped frames using bent saplings, then covered the whole thing with 2 separate layers of bark, woven mats, or whatever materials they could find. But here's the genius part. They left an air gap between those layers. That airspace acted like nature's own insulation system. Cold wind would hit the outer layer and basically give up trying to get through. Meanwhile, the inner layer trapped warm air from fires inside, creating a cozy bubble that could keep families comfortable even when temperatures dropped below freezing. The construction was surprisingly sophisticated. Builders would start with flexible wooden poles, bending them into perfect arcs and securing them at ground level. Then came the tricky part, getting both layers positioned just right. Too close together and you'd lose the insulating effect. Too far apart and you'd waste precious materials. Interior fires heated the trapped air between walls, while smoke holes at the top let out fumes without creating major heat loss. Smart positioning of these openings meant smoke would draw upward naturally, keeping the living space breathable while maintaining warmth. One small fire could heat the entire structure for multiple people, way more efficient than everyone huddling around separate flames. The double wall design worked in summer too. Hot air would rise between the layers and escape through the top, while the inner space stayed relatively cool. Basically, these shelters were the original 4-season homes, and the weird part is how fast they could be assembled. Experienced builders could put one together in half a day, making them perfect for seasonal moves or emergency situations. The flexibility meant they could be partially disassembled for repairs without tearing down the whole structure. But some tribes took heating innovation even further, developing portable solutions that could literally move with the seasons. Plains tribes had figured out something brilliant about staying warm while constantly moving across vast grasslands. Their solution? The tipi, a towering cone of buffalo hides that could keep families cozy even when winter winds howled across the prairie. These weren't just any animal skins thrown over poles. Buffalo hides were thick, weatherproof, and amazingly durable. The women who crafted these covers knew exactly which hides worked best. Older buffalo had tougher skin that lasted longer, while younger animals provided softer inner layers. They'd spend weeks preparing each hide, scraping off hair, softening the leather, and cutting precise shapes that would overlap perfectly. Here's where it gets clever. The overlapping hide system created multiple barriers against the cold. Wind hit the outer layer and got blocked. Rain rolled right off. Snow piled up harmlessly on the sides, but the real magic happened inside. A small fire in the center could heat the entire space fast. The cone shape naturally drew smoke upward and out through adjustable flaps at the top. These flaps weren't just holes. They could be repositioned based on wind direction to prevent downdrafts while still letting smoke escape. Genius engineering, really. The hide walls absorbed heat from the fire and radiated it back inward all night long. Even when the fire died down to embers, families stayed warm wrapped in buffalo robes. The dense leather acted like insulation, trapping heated air inside while keeping frigid outside air from sneaking in. And the weird part is how portable this whole heating system was. 20 minutes to take down, load on travois, and move to the next camp. 20 minutes to set up again and have a warm home. Try doing that with your modern house. The adjustable smoke flaps made all the difference during storms. Families could seal up tight when blizzards hit, keeping every bit of warmth inside. Then there's the entrance design, a flap that could be weighted down or tied shut, creating an airlock effect that prevented heat from rushing out every time someone came or went. But even these mobile heated homes had limitations that led some tribes to develop completely different approaches. Ever wonder how Native Americans managed to stay toasty warm all night without electric blankets? They figured out something pretty brilliant that hotels charge extra for today. Hot rocks became their portable heating system, but we're not talking about grabbing any old stone from the yard. These folks knew which rocks wouldn't explode when heated because, yes, some rocks literally blow up when they get too hot. Trust me, nobody wants a granite grenade going off in their sleeping area. The process was surprisingly sophisticated. First, they'd build a roaring fire and carefully select stones that had been tested over generations. River rocks? Absolutely not. Those contained water that would turn to steam and create rocky shrapnel. Instead, they chose dense, dry stones that could handle extreme heat without cracking. Once the fire heated these grandfather stones until they glowed red hot, the real magic began. Using wooden tools or deer antlers, they'd carefully transport the scorching rocks to predetermined spots under sleeping areas. Then came the genius part. They'd bury these natural heaters under layers of sand, dirt, or clay. This created the world's first heated floors. The stones would slowly release their warmth throughout the entire night, keeping sleeping areas at comfortable temperatures for 6 to 8 hours. Animal skins or woven mats spread on top provided a safe, cozy surface that felt like sleeping on a warm cloud. Some tribes got really fancy with this system. They'd create raised sleeping platforms with multiple hot stone chambers underneath, basically building custom-heated beds for different family members. The warmth would radiate upward through the carefully designed layers, creating zones of perfect temperature. But here's what made this technique truly remarkable. It worked in temporary shelters, too. Traveling families could dig quick heating pits anywhere, heat up rocks from their portable fire, and create instant warmth that lasted all night. No electricity required. The principle behind hot rock heating is identical to modern radiant floor systems that cost thousands to install. Yet another example of indigenous innovation that we're still copying today. Speaking of copying nature's designs, wait until you discover how they turn simple mud into sophisticated climate control systems. Hot rocks under your bed were brilliant, but what happened when winter storms lasted for weeks? You needed walls that could laugh at howling winds and freezing rain. Native Americans discovered something remarkable about mixing dirt with water and a few other ingredients. Clay and mud plaster became their secret weapon against the cold. But this wasn't just slapping wet dirt on wooden frames and hoping for the best. Different tribes developed sophisticated recipes that would make modern contractors jealous. Some mixed clay with chopped grass or animal hair for strength. Others added tree sap or pine pitch to make the mixture waterproof. The magic happened in how these walls actually worked. During sunny winter days, thick mud walls soaked up heat like giant batteries. All that thermal mass stored warmth from even weak sunlight. Then, as temperatures dropped at night, the walls slowly released that captured heat back into the living space. Your home stayed cozy for hours after the sun disappeared. And the weird part is how incredibly tough this stuff was. A well-made mud plaster wall could shed rain for decades without cracking. When small repairs were needed, families simply mixed up fresh batches using materials from their own backyard. No hardware store required. Then there's the wind-blocking power. Dense mud coating sealed every tiny gap where cold air might sneak through. These weren't just barriers against weather, they were climate control systems that worked around the clock. Some walls measured over a foot thick, creating fortress-like protection that kept interior temperatures stable even during brutal storms. Many tribes treated wall plastering as an annual community event. Families gathered to remix mud, repair damage, and add fresh protective layers before winter arrived. The social aspect made hard work enjoyable while ensuring everyone's home stayed properly sealed. Different regions developed their own mud recipes based on local soil conditions. Desert tribes created sun-baked walls that reflected heat during scorching days. Northern communities mixed in organic materials that provided extra insulation against freezing temperatures. But what happened when you needed to heat spaces too large for individual families? The answer involves some seriously clever engineering with shared fires. Picture trying to heat your house with one tiny space heater while everyone spreads out across different rooms. Sounds pretty inefficient, right? Well, Native American tribes figured out centuries ago that sharing heat sources wasn't just smart, it was survival. Large communal lodges became the ultimate answer to winter heating challenges. These weren't your average family homes. We're talking about structures that could house 20, 30, sometimes even 50 people around a single massive central fire pit. The Iroquois longhouses stretched over 100 feet long, with multiple families arranged along both sides of one continuous heating system. But here's where it gets clever. These weren't just big rooms with a fire plunked in the middle. Tribes engineered sophisticated airflow systems that distributed heat evenly throughout the space. Carefully positioned vents and channels guided warm air along the walls and up towards sleeping areas. Cold air got pulled down and back toward the fire, creating a natural circulation pattern that modern HVAC systems try to replicate. Families didn't just randomly scatter around these spaces either. There was a hierarchy based on need and status. Elders and young children got the prime real estate closest to the fire. Healthy adults took positions further out. During the coldest nights, everyone could shift closer together, maximizing shared body heat alongside the central flame. The fuel efficiency was incredible. Instead of 10 families each maintaining their own fires, gathering wood constantly, tending flames individually, one large fire could keep everyone warm. This meant less time spent collecting firewood and more energy available for other survival tasks. Some tribes calculated they used 60% less fuel with communal heating compared to separate family fires. Then there's the social aspect nobody talks about. Long winter nights became opportunities for storytelling, teaching, and community bonding instead of isolated family survival struggles. The shared warmth created shared culture. Of course, communal heating solved one problem but created others. What happened when you needed personal space? And how did tribes handle the challenge of staying warm while sleeping when fires burned low overnight? Ever wonder why your back aches after sleeping on the ground for just one night? Native Americans figured out the secret to comfortable winter sleeping thousands of years ago, and it wasn't just tossing a blanket on dirt. They built raised sleeping platforms that lifted bodies completely off the cold floor. Smart move, right? Heat rises, but cold settles down low like an unwelcome house guest that never leaves. These platforms were usually made from wooden frames or stone slabs, creating a buffer zone between sleepers and the freezing ground below. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't stop at just raising the bed. They turned the space underneath into an insulation powerhouse. Thick layers of dried grass, moss, pine needles, or even cattail fluff got packed beneath these platforms. This created a natural mattress system that trapped warm air and blocked cold from seeping up through the earth. The layering system was pure genius. During summer months, they used lighter materials like woven grass mats or thin animal hides. When winter rolled around, out came the heavy-duty bedding. Bear fur, buffalo robes, multiple deer hides. They piled it on thick. Some tribes created what we basically call sleeping bag systems, with one fur as a bottom layer and another as a top cover. Then there's the brilliant part about reducing fire dependency. With proper bedding insulation, families didn't need to keep fires blazing all night long. The trapped body heat stayed put, and the raised platform design meant they weren't fighting against cold ground trying to steal their warmth every single minute. Archaeological evidence shows some of these sleeping systems were incredibly sophisticated. Multiple layers, different materials for different seasons, even drainage considerations for areas with moisture problems. These weren't just survival solutions, they were engineered comfort systems that some modern campers would envy. The weird part is how this connects to reducing overall fuel needs for entire communities. When everyone sleeps warmer naturally, less wood gets burned overnight. But the real game changer came from combining smart sleeping arrangements with techniques that didn't require fire at all. Why burn wood when the sun does the work for free? Native tribes figured out that fighting nature was like wrestling a bear. You might win, but you'll probably get mauled. Instead, they worked with the environment, turning winter sun and wind patterns into their personal heating system. The secret started with house positioning. Smart builders faced their doors and openings toward the south, catching every precious ray of winter sunlight. While modern folks argue about which direction their couch should face, these tribes knew exactly where their entire home needed to point. Southern exposure meant free solar heating all day long. And when you're burning through firewood faster than a teenager goes through data, every bit of natural warmth counts. But here's where it gets clever. They didn't just plop houses anywhere and hope for the best. Windbreaks became their best friends. Carefully placed brush walls and woven screens that blocked those bone-chilling gusts without blocking the sun. Think of it as nature's version of a strategic fortress, where the enemy is freezing wind and your weapon is smart landscaping. Then there's the vegetation game. Tribes planted thick bushes and trees around their homes like a living blanket. These natural barriers created microclimates that could be several degrees warmer than the surrounding area. Your house basically got its own cozy bubble, protected from harsh winds while still soaking up solar energy. The genius part? This system worked 24/7 without anyone tending a fire. No chopping wood, no hauling logs, no worrying about flames dying out in the middle of a blizzard. Nature provided the energy, and human intelligence directed it where it needed to go. Some tribes got so good at this solar game that their homes stayed comfortable on sunny winter days without any fire at all. Makes sense, right? The sun hits Earth with more energy in 1 hour than humans use in a year. These builders just knew how to catch their fair share. Working with nature instead of against it wasn't just smart, it was the ultimate survival hack that kept people warm for thousands of years.